The winter sun hung weak and pale over the desert plains as Thomas McGraw, a weathered rancher with tired eyes and a heavy heart, trudged through the cold morning air toward his lonely cabin. Christmas was only a day away, but the holiday had lost its meaning long ago, ever since the tragic night when his wife died giving birth to their daughter, Emily. For 6 years, Thomas had lived in quiet sorrow, raising little Emily alone, burying his grief beneath ranch work, and failing to be both father and mother. Emily was the only light in his world, but the weight of his loneliness clung to him like winter frost. Life had shaped Thomas into a man of few words, but Emily, bright-eyed, curious, compassionate, was his opposite. She carried warmth like a flame, touching everyone she met. Thomas often wondered how a child born in tragedy could grow so full of kindness. This particular morning, as Thomas and Emily rode into town for supplies, a strange hush hovered in the air. The townsfolk gathered in small groups, whispering with nervous glances. Emily tugged her father's sleeve and pointed toward a figure standing near the trading post, a woman wrapped in a tan-woven shawl, long black hair braided neatly, her face strong yet carrying unimaginable grief. She was Native American, an Apache widow, as Thomas soon learned through the murmurs around him. Her husband had been killed 2 weeks earlier in a skirmish between scouts and raiders. Though she had no part in the attack, the town's fear and prejudice pushed her away. She stood quietly, clutching a small leather pouch, her eyes not pleading but simply existing. Emily looked at her with innocent wonder, but Thomas felt tension rise. He had no quarrel with anyone, but the West was harsh, and misunderstandings between settlers and tribes often turned deadly. Still, something about the widow's posture, a quiet dignity in her sorrow, stirred. A memory of his own wife on the day Emily was born, gasping for breath, her eyes filled with both pain and peace. Thomas tried to steer Emily away, but the girl slipped from his grasp and walked toward the woman, who looked down with surprise. "Hi," Emily said softly. "Are you cold?" The widow hesitated, then gave a small nod. Emily reached into her own coat pocket, pulled out a small wool scarf she had knitted herself, crooked, lumpy, uneven, and held it out. "You can have this. My mama taught me to make it." Thomas froze, his heart pounding. Emily rarely spoke of her mother, and when she did, it was in whispers, as if reciting a legend. The widow's eyes softened. She knelt down and accepted the scarf with both hands, pressing it gently to her chest. "Thank you," she said, in accented English, her voice low and warm. Thomas stepped forward protectively, but Emily turned toward him, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy," she whispered loudly, "she's alone, like us." The widow lowered her gaze, but Emily kept smiling, tugging Thomas's sleeve again. As they rode home, Emily would not stop talking about the woman. She had questions Thomas struggled to answer about her people, her pain, her life. That night, as snow drifted lightly over the ranch, Thomas stood at the window watching Emily sleep, clutching her tiny blanket, the same one her mother had wrapped her in. He felt an ache grow in his chest, a loneliness too heavy to bear. On Christmas morning, Emily woke before dawn, bursting with excitement Thomas hadn't seen in years. "Daddy, come outside." "Hurry!" she cried, pulling him by the hand toward the porch. The freezing desert air burned his lungs as he stepped outside, and froze. Standing in the snow-dusted light was the Apache widow from the trading post. Her shawl fluttered in the wind, and beside her sat a small woven basket filled with dried herbs, handmade ornaments, and a carved wooden figure of a mother holding a child. Emily ran to her and hugged her without hesitation. Thomas stood in stunned silence. Emily turned, eyes sparkling, and pointed at the woman. "Daddy," she said, her voice trembling with excitement, "this is your Christmas present." Something inside Thomas cracked open. He saw the widow not as a stranger, but as someone carrying the same grief he had borne for years. And in Emily's innocent act, he saw a bridge between two wounded souls. Thomas breathed a long, shaky breath, and his life began to change in ways he never expected. Thomas stood motionless on the porch while Emily clung to the Apache widow's hand as though she were someone they had known forever. Snowflakes drifted lazily between them, settling on the woman's dark braids and on Thomas's wide-brimmed hat. For a moment time felt frozen, like the world was holding its breath. The widow did not step forward. She simply stood with quiet dignity, waiting, not imposing, not expecting, only offering something unspoken. Thomas approached slowly, every footstep crunching beneath him, each one carrying the weight of years of loneliness. He stopped just a few feet away, unsure of what to say. The widow bowed her head respectfully. "Your daughter," she said gently, "has the spirit of a warm fire. She brought me comfort on a cold day." Thomas rubbed the back of his neck, feeling awkward. She meant well. Kids don't see things the way adults do. Emily looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, can she stay for Christmas breakfast, please?" The widow's gaze shifted, not wanting to intrude. "I do not wish to trouble you. I only came to bring this." She extended the woven basket toward Thomas. Inside were gifts crafted by hand, herbs for healing wounds, dried berries, small wooden charms carved with Apache symbols of protection. At the bottom lay the wooden carving of a mother and child, polished smooth, delicate, made with love. "These belong to my husband's mother," she said softly. "They are all I have to offer in return for your daughter's kindness." Thomas swallowed hard. The gesture was humbling, sincere. The cold wind stung his eyes, or maybe it was something deeper. "Ma'am," he said finally, "you don't owe us a thing. And you're welcome here, if you want to stay a bit." Emily clapped her hands joyfully. "See, Daddy? I told you it's Christmas." As they entered the warm cabin, the widow looked around curiously. She admired the handmade cradle Thomas had built, the old quilt stitched by his late wife, the little drawings Emily kept on the walls. There was silence, but not the heavy kind Thomas had lived in for years. This silence was gentle, peaceful. Emily eagerly showed the widow her toys and drawings, speaking with excitement, while Thomas prepared breakfast with more energy than he'd felt in ages. As they all sat around the small wooden table, something quietly beautiful happened. Emily began telling stories about her mother, stories she rarely shared. The widow listened with deep respect, offering small smiles and nods. When Thomas spoke about the struggles of raising a child alone, the widow understood instantly. She shared her own grief, losing her husband to conflict he never wished for, and Thomas felt an unexpected connection form between them. Two people from different worlds, bound by loss. After breakfast, Emily tugged the widow outside to build a snow desert fort, as she called it. Thomas watched from the doorway, seeing the widow laugh, softly for the first time, a sound as fragile and pure as winter bells. Hours passed, and their presence began to feel natural, like the missing pieces of a puzzle finding their place. But when the sun began to set, the widow stood, brushing snow from her dress. "I should return to my people," she said quietly. Emily's face fell, her small hands clutching the woman's dress. "But you're supposed to stay for Christmas." Thomas stepped forward. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. "You don't have to leave. Not today." The widow looked at him, unsure. "Your people, they will not approve." Thomas shook his head slowly. "And your people? Will they be upset if you spend Christmas with us?" The widow hesitated, then gave a small smile. "No, they will understand kindness. They always have." Emily ran to Thomas and hugged his leg, whispering, "Daddy, we're not alone anymore." The widow turned toward the horizon where the sky glowed, orange and gold. "My name is Ayana," she said gently. It means eternal blossom," Emily shouted proudly before she could finish. Ayana laughed, nodding. "Yes." Thomas extended his hand. "I'm Thomas, and if you'd like, you're welcome here any time." Ayana looked at his hand for a long moment, then placed hers gently in his. A bond formed, slow, fragile, but real. That night, as they sat around the small fire inside the cabin, Emily nestled between them, telling stories only a child could imagine. Ayana listened with warmth, and Thomas found himself smiling without effort. For the first time in years, the cabin felt full, not of people but of life, of warmth, of family. Emily's Christmas wish had come true, not through gifts or decorations, but through the healing of broken hearts. As the fire crackled softly, Thomas looked at the two most important souls in his life, one he had raised, and one fate had brought to him, and whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Christmas had given him something he never expected, not just hope, but a second chance at family, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at love again. If you want more emotional Western dramas, Native American stories and heart-touching cinematic tales, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Your support keeps these powerful stories coming.